And welcome back to Love Your Food. This week we have this super simple and delicious fruit and oat bread, perfect for brunch or even for dessert. But first I'd like to remind everyone that we have an affiliate link with Chef's Temp. If you need a kitchen thermometer or meat probe, please check out the link in the description below and use code LOVEYOURFOOD on checkout for 15% off your order. We'd also like to thank all of our patrons over on Patreon. I'll put a link for that in the description as well. And in the meantime, here's our ingredients. So we've got some oats, just regular rolled oats, some vanilla, an apple, some butter, some eggs, some fruit. We've got frozen berries, strawberries and blueberries, some yogurt, baking powder, maple syrup, and some lemon juice. Now the first thing we want to do is bloom the oats a little bit. So we're going to mix the lemon juice with some water, some hot water, and we want this to just sit together until the oats have sort of softened and bloomed a little bit. So we're just going to set that aside, stir it up a little bit, and set that aside to sit for a little while until those have nicely softened up. Now you don't want to use quick oats for this. They're just going to kind of disintegrate. You want to use just regular, plain, rolled oats for this. We're also going to melt our butter. And you don't want to overheat your butter. You don't want to boil it or anything, so we got it to just below fully melted and then stirred it in. Now we want to use the peel of the apple, but we're not going to use it in a big strand or anything like that. So we're just going to shred that off on our cheese grater here. If you don't want to use the skin, you can just peel it off. We wanted to use it. We love the flavor. It's got a lot of nutrients in there as well, so we're just going to hold on to that if we can. And then we're just going to chop up the rest of the apple into pretty large dice. You want some nice texture in there. And here you can see Chef Caleb is going to chop that into sticks and then into squares. And it's going to be a pretty large dice. It's not going to be tiny, tiny little pieces. And this is just going to cook in the bread. This ended up being a little over. You'll see the measurement a little bit later, and we're going to have all the amounts in the ingredients below. Now, these strawberries were pretty big, so we're going to cut those in half. These are some local strawberries that we had frozen last summer when they were fresh, and we've still got them on hand in our deep freeze. So in goes the oats into the apple peel that we shredded. In goes the baking powder. We're going to try and spread that out and distribute it as evenly as we possibly can. In goes the maple syrup. And you can use date syrup. You could use molasses for this as well, whatever you prefer. In goes the melted butter. And then we're going to add in our yogurt. And you want to make sure you scrape all of that out of there. You want to use you don't want to use a really firm yogurt for this. You want to use something that's runny. So a pressed Greek yogurt is probably not exactly what you want. And then into that is going to go our 2 eggs. This is really simple. We're just going to add everything together and then mix it all up. And this is a completely flour-free recipe. There's no flour at all in this, so it's really easy to do all of this. A little dash of salt, though. You do want to use a little bit of salt. And then a little tiny bit of vanilla in there as well, just for a little bit of flavor. And then we're just going to mix everything all together. And it does make quite a loose batter. It is not super, it's not going to hold its shape. It's very much a batter, not a dough. Once it's sort of mixed together, we're going to add in our diced apples. You can see there was a little over a cup. It was like a cup and a third. And then in goes our frozen fruit. And depending on the flavor profile you want, you could replace the apple with rhubarb. You could replace the berries, the strawberries with raspberry, whatever you want. Cranberries can go in here. Honestly, it's completely up to you. So we're going to put that into a loaf pan that has been prepared with butter. And we discovered you probably actually also want to have a layer of parchment at the bottom, or maybe just flour the whole thing in addition to the butter. It did stick a little, so the butter wasn't quite enough. And you want to make sure it's all nice and level, and that's going to go into our preheated oven. Now, we tried taking it out. It didn't look quite done yet. You can see here, it jiggles a little still. It is bubbling up around the outside and around the edges. We tried this with we just measured it with a little toothpick here, and it came out quite wet. Dough wasn't sticking to it, but it was quite wet, so we just stuck that back in and let it cook for a little bit longer. And then when we took it out the next time, you can see it had a lot more color on top. It had pulled away from the sides a little bit more. It definitely looked a lot more done. Definitely coming away from the sides. And when we used the toothpick again, it came out a little greasy, but not wet anymore. And it's a very, very tender sort of cakey bread. As you can see, it's super difficult to cut. Actually, we should have just used a chef knife. The bread knife kind of tore it apart. It's very delicate. It's super tender. And you can see it's very, it's got that texture of oaty and eggy. It's really delicious. Really nice if you slice it and then fry it in a pan in some butter and get it nice and brown. The crust is the most amazing part. It's delicious. We hope you'll give this one a try, and that's it. That's the whole thing. Super easy and delicious. If you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. I'd like to thank our patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to support us there, I'll put a link for that in the description below as well. And remember to love your food.